Well, hello, and welcome back. I'm AJ O'Neill, and I will be your instructor today for today's Beyond Code Live. What we're going to be talking about is time zones in JavaScript, which is probably one of the most difficult problems that I have ever come up against. In the recent years, it's become a little easier, but we'll get into it in just a second. Before I start, just want to invite you to go to gist.github.com so that you can take notes as you learn and then potentially use that as a blog article or something for yourself. And if you have one of those aha moments where something clicks, it makes sense for you, it feels worthwhile and valuable, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. I will go ahead and dive in. So I'm going to do a quick recount of the problem. I went into this yesterday and it was more discovery, exploratory. Now I feel like I've got the solution. Recap the problem real quick for those of you that weren't watching yesterday. So we want to answer a couple of questions. How do we get from a specific time zone, say America, New York, to UTC? So if it's 5 p.m. on January 1st in America, New York, what time is it UTC? And we also want to know what is the offset at that given time. So for New York is typically either 4 or 5 hours different from UTC. And then we also want to be able to do the opposite direction. We want to be able to say, given that we know a UTC, how can we represent that in a given time zone? So just the inverse operation. If I know a timestamp that I have is UTC timestamp, what is it in the time zone? And the problems that we have with this are a myriad of problems because time is not simple to calculate. It's not something that you can just do with math. It's political, it's location aware, it is temporal, meaning it changes, time changes with time. Who knew? And then we have JavaScript problems on top of that. So time zones are a physical location. You live in a zone, and the time is different in that zone than in other zones. You have time offsets, which are different in a zone depending on the time. So in January, we are observing, is it in January we observe daylight savings, and in June we stop observing it or something like that. I don't ever remember which is which, but the offset switches in the same time zone. Then we have politics in the United States. A few years back, our daylight savings switched. Arizona doesn't have daylight savings, so it has its own time zone to account for that. And then there are times that do not exist or that exist twice, such as 2:30 a.m. I think it's 2:30 a.m. or it might be 1:30 a.m. But depending on what day it is, if you're switching from a daylight savings on or off, you either won't have 2:30 a.m. that night or you'll have 2:30 a.m. that night twice. And if you were creating software that tracked employee hours, for example, how long somebody's working that night, they would be pretty upset with you if they worked an 8-hour shift and you only gave them 7 hours of pay because 2:30 a.m. disappeared that night. And then we've got the JavaScript problems, which is what we're going to try to overcome here. JavaScript only has one sane date format, which is ISO, which we'll go into that in a second. But there's a date object and there's an international object for locales, and they don't agree with each other. So the date object knows an offset, but only for the time zone in which the code is running. So if it's running on a server, the offset's probably 0 because the server is probably set to UTC. And if it's running in a browser, the offset is always going to be whatever the offset of the time zone of the browser is. There's no way to give it time zone information. So international does not know how to take a time in a time zone. It can only give you a time in a time zone given UTC. And we'll talk why this is really a true problem in just a minute. That's kind of what we're going to be solving for. And then the output from the international object, when you format a date, that date can't be parsed reliably by the date object. So you have two objects that deal with time, and they can't communicate with each other. And then the spec for how the international object works is actually it's a bit difficult to understand as a true spec. And then on MDN, which is normally where we look at our documentation for JavaScript, the documentation isn't even complete. And I also found a couple of cheat sheets that were incomplete as well. So the documentation around this is just really, really bad. It's always been a hard problem. It's gotten a lot better. It used to be literally impossible without lots and lots and lots of data and tables to load country information from around the world. Now that's built into the JavaScript runtime with the time zone database, which is updated by the operating system every so often. I think it's something like every 6 months, maybe. People, for example, Congress votes on when a time zone should change, and it changes. So that's kind of the backdrop here for all the craziness that we're dealing with and why this is a difficult problem. What we have to do is it is possible now in relatively a little bit of JavaScript. Now this that I have in front of you here, this is not correct per se. Well, it's we're going to get it correct, but this is kind of a starting point. And by the way, I do have comments open on Twitch and on YouTube right now. So if you're on either of those and you want to put something in the chat, I'll try to follow up with you as we go. But we're going to try to take the international object and the date object and get to a point where we can answer these 3 questions. And this one is actually the easiest one to answer. It's the one we have to start with to get to the other ones. So we might just start with that there. And I'm going to do this in the browser. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the console here. There we are. And I actually don't, my Git page here has some debug JavaScript that someone forgot to take out before the commit was pushed. So we're going to go into the other tab I've got open. There we go. I'm going to clear that out. And we're going to use that console. Let me close this one out, because otherwise it's going to have those console logs appearing over and over again. But let's go ahead and start with just the current time and a set of options. So I could have sworn I had this updated a little bit somewhere. I have more complete code than this, but I think it's on my other computer right now. I didn't actually save the change. I should have done that before I started this, but whatever. So we need to start with a bunch of options because well, let me just do this maybe without the options first. Let me try that. Let me try what happens if I just do this without the options. That way we just get a baseline for what we want to do. Okay, I'm just going to let that sit there for a second. So new date. Let's do var d equals new date. So a date, represented as a string, is going to be in a different format based on what your location is. This is not good. So we have a toISO string, which will give you the date specifically in, let me turn the AC off so it doesn't bother us here. You can do toISO string and it will give you a UTC time, but it omits the offset of the time zone that you're in, which is a little bit frustrating. It seems like there should be an option for that. And then we have, what else do we have? ToString, now toLocale date string, date time string maybe? toLocale string. There we go. So it's actually, it's surprisingly difficult to get a date in a sane format because you would have to know what language the browser is set to know what the date format is going to come out. And then you'd have to know that the Congress or international, or not international, the national standard body of that country hasn't changed what the format is, because they have changed from time to time. So let's ignore that because it's just a hard, mostly unsolvable problem. We'll just skip over that. We know that we have one sane format, which is toISO string. That's a format that's guaranteed to always work no matter where the person is, and it's guaranteed to always give a correct time. So now the next thing we need to do is we need to format a date. And so what I'm going to do is say, let's just use whatever the default is, and OD. We're going to format. We're going to use Let me put this in parens so this looks a little bit better. We're going to get an international object, and then we're going to tell it an international date time format object, and we're going to tell it to format the date. Okay. So it actually only gave us the date and not the date and the time. For that, we need to pass in the options. But it gives me the date and time in the US way of doing things. No, wait, which is this one? But yeah, this is so dumb. So we've got the month and then the day and then the year. Who in their right mind would put numbers out of order? They're numbers, for goodness sake. Either you go from least to greatest or you go from latest to greatest. Blah, 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 blah. Least to greatest or greatest to least. You don't go middle halvesies on this. But they did. So the next thing that we want to do here, I'm just going to show you in GB. Okay, that's sane at least. And then I forget what it is. You can do Russian. You could do any language and locale, and it'll pop it out for you in whatever way they like to show it. This is not very useful though, because we have no way of guaranteeing what the time is. But let's go back to that object here, because this is where the whole reason we want this in the first place is so this is the time zone I'm actually in. So let me change this. We're going to change this to New York. I'm not in the New York time zone. We want a numeric year, a numeric month, a numeric day, hour, minute, second. Millisecond actually isn't a thing. 12 hour we want to be false, but then I think, let's see, I think it's called hour, no, is it called H11? No, hour cycle. We have to set this to, I think, H23 so that it counts from 0 to 23 rather than 1 to 24, which actually that's not accurate because it counts from 24 to 1 and then from 1 to 23. That's the default behavior, but we want it to count from 0 to 23 and not have a 24 at all. Okay, so I think that's what we do for this. And then, so those are our options. So now if we take that date and we format it, let's say we're going to do ENUS and we're going to give it these options, then what we should see is the current time is 9:19 p.m. So that means in New York it's 11:19 p.m. So what we should see is, okay, that's the right date. It's still the same day. And then it's going to 23:14. So that would be 11:14. Yeah, so that makes sense. We've been doing this for 5 minutes. Okay. So now this is not quite good enough though, because this is not a format that we can guarantee. So we need to do format to parts. That's what we need to use. Now, thankfully, this is a kind of an awkward way of doing it, but it gives you each element of the string as an array. So have an array here, and in the array we have type month and then type literal. Literal just means a character that it is using as a separator or white space or whatever. So we can see it's got the month, the day, the year, the hour, the minute, the second, the fractional second. I don't know why it's not millisecond, but whatever, because the highest resolution is milliseconds, and you could technically set the fractional second digits to 1 or 2, but I don't know why you do this, because you could just substring it if you needed to. Why make something more weird? But whatever, that's the way that it is. Okay, so the next thing that I want to do, let me go back over here. I think I had this in here. We want to set the hour ahead by 1. The reason being that we want New York to trip over to tomorrow. So what I want to see is 5:27, because New York is just, it's less than an hour away from being the next day. And so I want to test that my hypothesis that setting this hour cycle H23 will keep it from doing the 24-hour format is correct. So I'm taking the date and I'm setting the hours to getting the hours plus 1. So now the date object has changed. So if I print the object again with the same options, then if I'm lucky, I should see, okay, It has gone to hour 24, which is not what we want, but it has gone to the next day. So I need to look at some documentation real quick because I obviously copied something wrong. Let's see what we have here. I think it's called hour cycle. It is called hour cycle. H23. That is... So I'm going to guess that this is not supported in all browsers. So I'm going to go ahead and just not count on that to be there. Let's just get rid of that option, assuming I didn't make a typo here. So hour cycle H23. Let's double check. Is it capital? No, it's lowercase h23. Hour cycle is spelled correctly. Hour cycle. Let me. I don't know why. It seems like they could have just written this. It's like they wrote code in English. They could have just written that in code or some sort of grammar. That's kind of weird to basically have line numbers. And var x equals time clip. If x is nan, yeah. They should have just written that in JavaScript. Weird. It'd be easier to read. But no matter. I obviously, well, not obviously, it's not obvious. Nothing's obvious. But I did the right thing here from the documentation. And it didn't work, so I'm going to get rid of that. We're not going to worry about it anymore. I think I did see something in the support matrix about that not being supported in all browsers or something like that. So we'll just forget about it. All right. Now at this point, what we've managed to do is we can accomplish, kind of sort of, we can accomplish this last goal here. If I have a UTC time, then I can get what that time is in a time zone. Now, I'd want to be able to format that in a sane, reasonable way. And this is where I would actually want the code that I had already written a little bit of. But it's okay. I'll write it again because we're doing this together. Okay. Let me take notes of what's working. I'm sorry, I'm switching back and forth between screens here. Maybe there's a better way to do that. Nope. That's just the way that I got to do it. But I'm just going to end this text block here. Let me go ahead and maybe I get lucky and that gives me highlighting. No, it doesn't. That's all right. I'm going to just copy and paste as we go. So we're gonna have function from UTC to time zone. And then we're going to take a date object and a time zone string. That's what this is going to need to be as a function. That makes sense to me. And what we're actually going to want to do, these options are generic except for the time zone. The time zone, let's call this TZ options, and we're going to make a copy. So object.assign will make a copy. So we're going to make a copy of options. Oops, I think it's like this. Yeah. That has time zone. Set to whatever the time zone is. We'll get rid of this guy here. And then let's go ahead and say from UTC to time zone. And basically, we want this to be an ISO string because that's the only sane format that we have to work with, or potentially an object or an array. We have to decide on some format that we want to hand back that would be reasonable to give to a user. I think the most reasonable thing is going to be an ISO timestamp with the offset included. So we're going to need to have a way to get the offset, which we may end up wanting to have two functions. One, to get our own bespoke date object. Bespoke just means custom. And another that will give it to us in ISO format. Anyway, we know that we're going to have to take in a date. So actually, let's just go here, var d equals new date. And so we're going to take in d, and then we need a time zone, which perhaps is just as well that we name the variable the same as what it's actually called in the object. We'll call this date. Format to parts date. And then we're going to have to return, object of assign. Oh, that was totally wrong there. All right, so we've got that. Sorry, I'm jumping around a little bit. From UTC to time zone, there we are. And let's say, we'll call this D2. And we'll console.log whatever D2 is. We have to think about a way that we want it to be. I think an object and a string makes sense for this. And this kind of makes sense to have year, day, month, blah, blah, blah. I don't know about fractional second, though. I think millisecond's a better choice for the name. But I'm just thinking, how do we keep things mostly similar to the way that they already are, but then make them a little bit better? Okay, sorry. Let me go back here. I'm just going to copy this whole bit. Format to parts. I think, because I don't like doing things that are not super intuitive. So I'm going to do a couple things here. One, I don't like that I'm not getting highlighting in this. That makes me sad. I'm going to go over to the gist, and I'm going to call this test.md, and we're just going to put this in here. See, do we get highlighting? No? How about .js? What if I do that? Do I get highlighting? Okay, I get highlighting there. Cool. So let me do something where I get some highlighting. See, can we make this bigger? And then still, oh, I lost the ability to adjust the size of it. Oh, well, I was hoping to get more in the screen. Such are the way of things. All right, but now I've got highlighting. This is a little easier to read. Let me put a little extra spacing in there. So we've got our options. Our option, time zone is going to get set here. And then we're going to create a new, I'm going to call this, I don't know what to call it, DF, maybe? Date formatter? Fumpter? Formatter? Sure. And we're going to give it, does it matter what the locale is? I don't think it does. I think we should be able to just put in default here. And I think that that should work. Because when we do format to parts, and then we do var parts, and we can just return parts for now. This is sufficient. When we format to parts, we're going to get all of the same pieces. We're going to get a numeric year, month, day. And as far as I know, and I could be mistaken, but as far as I know, these should all be in a sane format, meaning the year, there could be some country, there may be some country where they don't live in 2021. Maybe they are based off of some other calendar. And I haven't read the JavaScript spec to see if it respects that. But I think all the countries that we care about, at least, meaning ones that are on the internet making orders for things online and using services like Gmail, I think all of them use the same year that we use, 2021. Likewise, I think their months, I think everybody has 12 months that go from 1 to 12, and that their days start at 1 and their hours go from 0 to 23 or 1 to 12 twice, but we have the hour 12 false, so that would be 0 to 23, and we're going to handle the case of 1 to 24, and I believe that everybody follows the convention that 0, 0, or 24 are the first hour of the next day, not neither of those are the last hour of the previous day. Likewise with minute and second, fractional seconds. So assuming that that is true, we can use default. Now, it would be nice to say, oh, well, let's just use E and US because we know that that will always work. The problem there is that there's not a guarantee that their system will have the EN US locale package installed. Most likely, if they're using a browser like Brave or Chrome or Firefox, it will. But if they're using Node, it's probably going to use their Unix system time mapping stuff. I'm not sure if it gets baked into Node with the Node release. I would imagine it probably uses the system bits. And so if they're running on a minimal Linux server that doesn't have all the locales and just has some sort of generic locale, then I don't know that we can't make that assumption that E and US exist. It's a reasonable assumption, but it's not foolproof. Oh, excuse me. Not foolproof. Also, I'm really curious. I think C is actually a locale. I just want to see what happens if we do that. No, did not work. Let's see if we try lowercase c. What if we try ANSI? Yeah, okay. I was just trying some old locales that exist on Linux systems usually. Okay, so we're going to take whatever the default is. We're going to assume, and I'm going to make a note here. Every country uses the same year, right? Because that's the case where this would fail. All right, we're going to get the parts. Now this is good enough that we could go ahead and test it. So let's go ahead and test it. Now we're going to get a new date. That's fine. I've already overcome the... Oops, no, that's not where I want to be. Let me go back over here. Okay. Month, day, year, hour, minute. Wait, hour 21. New York? Wait, a minute ago it was 23. What did I do wrong? What did I do wrong previously? No, this is 21 is... That's 9. Huh. That doesn't make sense to me. Hour is 21. If I add 12 to 9, I get 21. That's the current time. Not in New York. Ah! I passed in the wrong options object. Okay, cool. So it did not get the time zone. Good thing that I looked at that, right? 23. Okay, that's what we expect. So let me go ahead and replace this. And let's continue to figure out what we need to do. Now, if we look at that array, it has an object with a type and a value for each thing. So some of these we need to parse in a special way. But for the most part, we can just take the value parsed as an int. So let me think about the ones we need to parse in a special way. We don't. Milliseconds should be fine. Literal we can just get rid of. We don't need that ever, and it's repeated. Second looks good. Minute looks good. Hour is one that we need to parse in a special way because it's 24. We need to set it to 00 instead. I could have shown this, but you can take my word on it. If you use the date formatting and the hour is 23 and you pass it to the date object, it will fail to parse. It'll say invalid date. So it's very odd that the way that the international object spits out the date is not parsable, but so it is. Okay, year 20. I feel like there was something else here. Oh, month. Month is special because in JavaScript, months are 0 indexed, which makes no sense to me. I have no... The date is not 0 indexed, but yet the month is 0 indexed. So weird, but so it is. Okay. Yeah, I think I've got enough information here. Let's just start most significant to least significant. What do we need to get? So parts dot for each. Oh, first of all, going to make an object called whole, because there's the parts and there's the whole, right? So I'm going to take this and I am going to take each part and I'm going to grab the value out of that part. So part.value. And I'm going to do a little switch on the part.type. So part.value, so part.type might be, say, year, and then part.value is going to be 2021. So I'm going to switch on that, and I'm going to say case. What are the special cases? First of all, literal, we can just return. We don't need to do anything with that. What I'm going to do in this loop, I didn't say this at the beginning, but what I'm going to do in this loop is I'm going to combine the parts into a whole that rather than being an array with many different objects, it's just going to be a single object with the pieces that we need. Year, month, day, and so on. So if the type is literal, we don't need it. If it is, I feel like there's something else. There's something I'm forgetting. I'll have to go look back later. I think there was, I think actually time zone name is something that we can get out of this. Month. So month was special. Oops. I always put break right after I do the case statement so I don't forget, because otherwise they fall through. So with month, what we want is to say val is equal to parse int val 10 minus 1. Months are 0 indexed for new date. What else? Case. I think it was fractional second was special because we want to call it millisecond. Fractional second. And this is another weird thing. So the option is fractional second digits. But if you notice, what we get back is fractional second. So I find that to be odd. Please don't write APIs like this. And if you are on the standards body that decided that it should be this way, please, I would love to see a conference talk on why it is that way. What, and I'm serious, what hard decisions was it like? Well, yeah, it would have made sense to do it this way. We had to do it this way because I am open to there might be a reason, but I don't necessarily think that there must be a reason. Okay, what I'm going to do here, I guess first, my thought is that at the end of all this, I'm going to take the value and I'm going to stuff it into the whole by the part.type. So whole part.type equals val. So I'm going to take the parsed value. So this would be, for example, whole.month equals 0. Except, no, that actually will happen. In the case of the fractional second, I don't want to call it by that name, fractional second. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do whole.millisecond equals parseInt val 10. And I think that that should work well enough. And I think there was one other special case. The default behavior should be that val equals parseInt val 10. Oh, I remember the other one. This should go here. I'm doing these in order of significance. So month, hour, fractional second. So val is going to be equal parseInt val 10. And because this could be up to 24, what I'm going to do to shift it to be 0 indexed is I'm going to use mod 24. And let me show you what this does, because a lot of people don't know about the mod operator, don't feel comfortable with it. It's simply the remainder operator, and it's very, very useful. It's not something that you use necessarily every day, but it is something that when you're doing, when you're working with indexes, it comes out to be quite useful. So if I do 0 mod 24, I get 0. If I do 1 mod 24, I get 1. If I do anything all the way up to 23 mod 24, I get that number. But when I go to 24 or beyond, I get back to 0. And if I were to go to 25, which is not possible at the time, I'd go back to 1. So this is a nice, elegant way. It might be slightly more readable to do a check if the number is 24, then set the number to 0. But I feel that this is reasonable. It's reasonable to assume that a person knows the mod operator if they're a programmer. But I'll put a comment here just in case. Let's see. Because sometimes 24 is used instead of 0, make 24 0. I think that's a good enough comment for now. And then fractional second, maybe I should put a comment here too. And I put a comment here too. The separator, separate, but I think it's separator. English is so weird. You know that? Let's Google it. I do this all the time. But when I'm in Vim, I actually have a spell checker in Vim, so it'll give me a little underline and let me know that I'm spelling something wrong. Anyway, the separator and white space characters. Oh, let's just say ignore. There we go. That's clear. Ignore separators and white space characters. Good. And then I'm just going to say it like it is. Fractional second is a dumb name. Should be millisecond. And we're going to use millisecond because even though technically it's plural, it is milliseconds. Everything else here is singular. So I'm just going to stick with that. And that's fine. That doesn't offend me too much. Year, month, day, hour, minute, second. Yeah. You could ask the question, what is the millisecond? And that would be correct. Okay, with all of that, what I expect now to get when I run this again is instead of, oops, let me go back up to what we had before. Let me see if I can just get it to show parts. Nope. Okay. That's all right. Here we are. So instead of having it show this array, when I paste this, we should get an object instead, unless I forgot to do something else, which is entirely possible. So I'm going to go ahead and paste this code, hit enter, and I've got something wrong somewhere. Let me just go ahead and give this a little sanity check here. Looks good. Looks good. Looking for a parse error where I have maybe not a closing bracket or where I have a premature. I think that's it right there, actually. I think, is this it? No, that's for the switch. Okay, so this does have its closing bit. The switch has its closing bit. The returns look right. Let me see if I can get some more information from that error. What is it saying? Okay. One of those things is really hard to see. I put a semicolon where I meant to put a colon. No big deal. Fixed it. Let's go back and clear. By the way, Command K is clear the screen. And then let's take a look at this again. Beautiful. Okay, so now we've pretty much accomplished task 1. We have a way that given, or rather task 3, we have a way that given a UTC time, we can get back, no, wait, what is this? No, that was not a UTC. Oh, I'm confused. No, it is right. So all date objects are UTC objects. So given a date object, it will give us back the time in a time zone. So Step 3 is complete. Now we got to work backwards to number 1. So the next thing, let's go ahead and we want to do some formatting with this as well, but let's just count our blessings. I'm going to go ahead and click Save Secret Gist. I'm going to go back and I'm going to put this into the code repository later, but just for the sake of kind of working with it quickly while we're doing this together, I think that this is an all right way to go about it. All right, so that we have what I would consider to be a sane object that has all the pieces of a date. Now, do I have to make this slightly smaller to get my edit option? I hate responsive design. It's always doing weird, funky stuff. Right. So the next thing we need to do is we need to figure out the difference between a UTC time and a formatted time. And the way that we're going to do this is we're going to present both times as if they were UTC. So I'm gonna say function to ISO string, and let me put in here my I'm going to call this D2 or our date. I don't know. My date. I don't know what to call it. Whole. We'll just call it whole because that's what I called it there. So we're going to take a whole, and what we're going to do is get the whole.year plus, and I think I'll use a template string for this. I'm not really a big fan of the new JavaScript features, but I think this is available in all browsers and platforms at this point, so it's probably safe to use, and it does make this maybe a little easier to read than if I was doing a bunch of pluses with strings. So I've got backticks here instead of quotes, and then we're going to do year hyphen month hyphen day t, and then we're going to do whole dot hour, which is going to be 0 to 23, as is rational and sane. I don't know why it would be any other way. Actually, for this, this is getting kind of long. So here's what I'm going to do. I am going to split this up. I don't know what is the right way to do it, like this. Yeah. Let's do dot second and then the fractional part. And I do understand the idea of doing the fractional part. The problem is that, because say you wanted to go down to microseconds or nanoseconds, so you want the fractional part to include 6 digits. The problem is that in JavaScript, it doesn't support higher resolution of accuracy, and it throws an error. Not only does it not just give you zeros or fail and then give you only 3 digits instead of 6, because that would be better than giving you the extra zeros, but it just errors out. And so I don't find that to be very helpful. I can see where it would be, but not really in JavaScript. So since millisecond is the highest resolution, and I don't see them being able to adjust the API in a future-proof way, because since it errors out, you know that you can't use it. Nobody wants to check, okay, what's the maximum resolution I can get? Let me try 3. Okay, that worked. Now let me try 4. Oh, that failed. I guess I'll have to stick with 3. You don't want to have to try each measure of resolution to know whether or not it failed. You want to have some kind of sane way to handle it. And we don't have one of those. So I think millisecond is the right thing to go with here. Anyway, and then at the end we need to put Z. So meaning Zulu time. So I think this is right. So D2 is what we called it. Let me go back here. What is this? It's always background scripts running in the console. To ISO string. Let's give it D2. Odd. I thought that was defined right here. Was it not? D2. Yeah, it is defined. Okay. Oh, probably when I do Command K, it must clear out temporary variables or something too. Yeah. Anyway, this looks right. Now it's wrong in the sense that this is not actually, was not intended to be. Oh, I didn't pad. Okay, I need to go back and make sure that the numbers are padded. I'll go do that because we just happened to get a time where everything worked. Oh, and I'm going to have to pad the start of this, aren't I? Multiply by 1,000. Hold on. Yeah, okay. I'm going to have to pad the start of everything. This one's going to have a pad start of 3. Have to think about that for a second. Anyway, let's assume that it was formatted correctly and had the leading zeros as it should. We have here what looks like an ISO date, but it's supposed to represent New York, but instead it is in Zulu time, meaning that it is representing UTC time. We started with a UTC time, so if we did D dot to ISO string, this is what the UTC representation of that time is. But what this allows us to do is we're going to be able to create 2 date objects, one that is faux UTC in the time zone of choice, and one that is actual UTC, and then we'll be able to do a diff between them. And with the diff between them, we will know what the time difference is, hopefully. I gotta think on that. Is that true? Yes, that is true. Okay. Because there's some edge cases that I had to think about, which we'll go over in a bit. Okay, so I need some way to pad these out. I guess maybe I could have not parsed them, and that would have been okay, because now I'm going to have to unparse them. But I'm just going to say cover all these things in a P2. Yeah, this is starting to get ugly. Let's just call this D so that it's not so long. Okay. And I put that in the wrong place, of course. There we go. Now it's in the right place. So this is where template strings, I feel like I've exhausted what should be done in a template string, because I don't think you should be writing JavaScript in a template string. And yet here I am writing JavaScript in a template string. So I've kind of, I don't know, it starts out simple, but it's a slippery slope. Okay, and that would actually be a P4. I don't think yours need padding because it's always 4. So hours, oh, whoops, that was supposed to be minute. So good to catch that. And then this is supposed to be, so basically everything is padded 2 except for year will always be 4 long. I think that's something that we can count on. And then milliseconds will need to be padded to 3. And the way that we do this is let's create a P2 function where we take in a string and then we just return string dot pad start, and then we give it, I think it's the number of characters it's supposed to have, and then the character it's supposed to start with. And I'm just doing this as a function because I wanted to have this string fit together without looking too cray-cray. And I feel like that does an all right job there. So let's give this a try and see if we get a string that is what it ought to be. So I probably just got rid of my, yep. So apparently when I do Command K, it clears out the temporary variables, which is not what I wanted to do, but whatever. With that said, I can just log this D2, which I don't like calling it D2 because it makes it sound like it's of the same type as this one when it's not. But let's go ahead and log that with the to ISO string that we want. And then I'm going to copy all this. I'm going to paste it in the console. And pad start. Start pad? I know why. string. So we're going to take some X. It's not necessarily a string yet. And we're going to make sure it's a string. And then we're going to pad start. Got it. There we go. Pasting that in. How is that possible? That doesn't even, oh, because it's right here too. Got it. There we are. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and update this because I think that it's going to work this time. And then click edit again. It's kind of, when I'm doing this kind of thing, when I'm not using Vim and I'm not using Vim because I want the live interaction active. There is some, I think it's Kodi.vim. There's a plugin for Vim that lets it evaluate JavaScript live as you're typing it. But for this type of work, I find that the interactive console is pretty decent. And so I'm okay sacrificing my editor just to get what I want to get here. Okay, this is looking almost right. And the reason it's looking almost right is because month, of course, has to be incremented. So we're looking pretty good here. Except for when I format this, I need to increment month by 1. So let's do +1 there. Yeah, definitely should not be doing this in a template string at this point. Okay, so with that, now we have accomplished our third great purpose. I've been listening to the Lightbringer series, so I'm thinking about great purposes, you know? All right, that is correct, yeah? This is New York. It is 2 minutes to midnight in New York. Yep, feel good about it. And this is excellent because now New York will actually be in 2 minutes in the time that I want it to be for testing of my edge case. So I'm going to go ahead and update my secret gist here, click edit again. And now we're on to an easy part before a hard part. The easy part here is that now we can get our time in both time zones that we need it in. So I'm going to, let's call this DNY or TZNY. I don't know. I'm just going to go ahead and move this here. And then maybe NY date. And then we can say UTC date. And then we can use UTC, which I guess technically we don't need to do that because, oops, technically we can just go straight to isostring. Yeah, we can. So I don't technically need to do that one. I'm going to leave that be because what I can do instead is, I don't know what to call this. Because I don't want to call it date, because it's not a date object, it's a date-ish object. I don't know. Because then what I want to call, well, I could just do this. Let's call it a D2, sure, whatever. NY D2 to isostring NY D2. But this is the important bit. Is that I can do new date of this. And if it's an isostring, it'll be a date. And then I could save our UTC date equals, well, I guess this is a UTC date. So I could just call this UTC date because all dates are UTC. But now that I've converted this back, New York is going, its offset is going to be behind. So I think I need to take the UTC date would be the source date, so to speak. And the New York date would be the target date. We want to find how is the target date different from the source date. So I think the way we do that is nydate.value of minus utc-date.value of, and this should give us the diff. So our diff equals, and what I want to do here, I want to log UTC date. Yeah, this is what I want to do. I want to log the UTC date. And we're going to do to ISO string. And then I also want to log the ny date to ISO string. And then I also want to log the diff. But let's take the diff and we want to divide this by probably want to divide it by, I think by 60 seconds times 60 minutes. No, we want to get to minutes. So 60 times 1,000, I think is what it is. And then we want, that should be an even number. We shouldn't have to round. Anytime you're doing division, you may have to round because it is possible because of this whole problem. Because of this whole problem right here, 0.1 plus 0.2. Because of that problem, it is good to always round numbers whenever you're doing multiplication or division or fractions of any sort. I guess more so division than multiplication. But whenever you're doing anything that could involve a float, it is good to round. And I don't want to use floor or ceil because this could be negative or positive. So I think I don't want to use those. I want to round to whatever's closest, not to whatever's lowest, because if it is off, it's going to be off by a small amount, and that would round, even if that were negative, that would round to the correct number. So we do want to use round, not floor or ceil. And then, is this right? So I guess what I need to do first is, well, let's just run it. Let's just run it and see. But what I'm expecting to happen here is that I've got my original date object, I've got my new date object that's faux UTC, but really to a time zone, and then I'm going to subtract their values, and then I'm going to divide the difference of the value, which is in milliseconds, which should result in 0 milliseconds. Because the milliseconds are going to be the same. What could be different are hours and minutes. And then, because it's going to be a matter of up to, how many hours can it, is it plus and minus 12? That seems about right. I think it actually goes plus or minus 13. I think there is a time zone that's like somewhere in the Arctic or something, that because it's part of the same country or international zone, it goes to positive or negative 13. But in any case, it's going to be less than a day for sure. And probably not more than 12, except in very special areas of the world. So what I'm expecting is that if I divide that by milliseconds and seconds, I'll get minutes. Okay, so let's go ahead and see what we get. And if it makes sense, it should be in the realm of, this looks right off the bat. So this is our time in UTC, I think. And this is our time in New York. Awesome. And this is our offset, which if we could convert that to, like, the normal format for this would be, say, negative 0400 or negative 0500 or plus 0500, etc. So that should be, I think that's 4 hours, right? Oh, whoops, 60. Yeah, so that's 4 hours. And then the other one that it could be is that it could be 5 hours. So that makes sense. So this looks right. So I'm feeling good about that. Now let's see, what do we do with this next? I'm going to do this. Var offset equals d.offset or z. And then we could put here offset. And that will take our bespoke date object and give us the ability to put an offset. Although we would want to format the offset. So we need to have a function that is format offset. And so we're going to take minutes and we're going to turn it into a string. So we're going to get first hours, which we can use again our mod operator. So if we divide by 60, and I think we need the absolute. I think that's what we need to do here because we're going to need to floor this. Yeah, so we're going to need the absolute. And then we're going to get the minute, because this is minutes. Let's call it minutes. Spell it all the way out. So m is going to be the same math.abs minutes. And minutes are going to be whatever the remainder is. And then if minutes is greater than 0, then we're going to return plus h.toString.padStart to 0 plus m.toString.padStart to 0. So actually, I think what I want here is offset equals nothing. I'm going to say it's plus else offset equals minus. And actually it should be greater than or equal to 0 because no. Else if minutes less than 0, let's see. What we want is if this is what we want. If minutes are 0, the first thing we want to do is just return z. This would be correct. Or rather, let's go one further. If not minutes. So if we have an empty string or we're not giving anything at all, we'll have that. Then we'll do our calculations. And then at the end, we'll return. Let's not call this, oh, apparently assign a keyword now. Okay. Yeah, so we should be returning something such as plus 500 or minus, I don't know, 730. Something like that. Format offset. Okay, that makes me feel better. So now let's go with that offset. That'll work. That's good. So the reason I'm doing this, I often forget to mention because I think 2 steps ahead sometimes. I'm imagining that we're going to do this offset calculation here in our main function, and then we're going to be able to return what the offset is inside of here. Now, in order to do that, we need to move some of this logic. Let me go ahead and update this. I should probably test that again to make sure everything's still kosher. I think that it will be. I don't think I did anything terrible here. Let's see what we get. Oh, I need to test my format offset function. So I need to test format offset on diff, I think. Format offset on diff. Ah, beautiful. That's exactly what we expect. Excellent. Okay. All right, so I need to move some of this stuff up a little bit. Where are we doing our calculation here? So I actually want to do this before I even get there, I think. Maybe we'll make a helper function. So we'll call this function get offset. And we'll pass it our D2 type of object, I think. I guess it needs two. It needs whatever our D1 was and our D2. Think on this for a second. I'm going to return basically this diff. I think that's essentially what I want. Let's take our D2. I think I will be able to move this into that inner function. I'm going to peek up a little bit. Well, let me finish this and then I'll peek up to the previous function and see if I can sneak this in there so that it comes out with its offset. That does seem like that's the right place to put it because that's where it has the original object and the updated bit. So it's going to get a new date. It's going to do this stuff here. It's going to log that out. Is it reasonable for it? It is reasonable for it to already have its offset. The offset we may not have formatted, but that would be okay. And then if the, oh yeah. I think this is going to work out just swell. I think this is going to work out just swell. Okay. So I'm going to take my get offset function. And I'm just going to make it a helper function. And by helper function, I mean these things that would not be used by someone who's using this library, but are used within the library. So private function, helper function, sometimes synonymous. So what we want to do is say whole.offset equals get offset, and we have the original D, right? Date. Okay. So there's our date. And then what is our D2 is whole. I think that's right. And then, so D2 would be That looks right to me. And then our rounding, oh, this needs to be not NY date. This needs to be TZ date. And we'll call this TZ date. And we'll call this UTC date. UTC date. And then TZ, what are we calling this thing? D2? I think that's a fair name for it. Yeah, TZD2, UTC date, bada bing, bada boom. Oh, and then we need to return the diff. Okay. So we also need to check is, does this work in the opposite direction? So let me make, let's say that we're not doing New York. What's the opposite direction of New York? Japan or something? Let me do a quick search to get a list of these. I know I have one somewhere because I've done this extensively. I think I've got it in some other repository where I was dealing with time. I think it was a Go project. But what I want to find is if I just put in a couple of these that I know, and just list of database time zones, time zone converter. Looking for the database that has all of these listed. This one looks good. Okay, great. So let's find a funky one. Do we have any plus 30s in here? We got a minus 30. Ah, there we go. A deprecated link to Asia Colombo. Let's do it. That's a great one to test with. So we're going to do the same thing using the same original date. But we're going to use Asia Colombo because it's going the opposite direction. So we want to make sure that I didn't just forget something or do something wrong and I have negative times work but positive times don't work or something like that. So I think it's all the same. We want to print out all the same stuff, but we're going to be using TZ instead of NY for all of these things. Where did TZ go? Oh. UTC date, NY date. Where did NY date go? NY date went into the big differ up here. That's what happened. TZ date. All right. So I think I still want that. Let me go ahead and bring that down here. We don't need that one. So TZ date is going to equal to NYD2 console.log NYD2. And looks like I'm going to have to do a little pause here. I don't know if I can actually pause the stream. Well, we're gonna blank out for a second, and I will edit this out, I guess, in the edited version. All right, so I had to take a little break there to put the little one to bed. Now, where were we? I think we were just about to test both our New York and our Asia with our time zones here. And you know what? I want to test Denver as well, actually. The reason being that Denver, my time zone, is still before midnight, and so it makes it a good one to test to get both sides of things here. Of course, we can create a date of a given time with an ISO timestamp. So I could do, for example, 2021 0526, except that this would not be correct because I have to adjust for what time it is plus 7 hours. What I have to go look. This might be just as well. 2704, let's say 15. I'll go with that. So we'll do 2704 15 59 000Z. Yeah. And if we just declare this, let's go ahead and just do it like this. And then get rid of what was I doing here? Get rid of all the NYs and just call them TZ. And then we can console.log those. Yeah. Oh, and also I could have put I should put the time zone into the object because that is a good piece of information to have alongside the offset and all that. So let's go ahead and put time zone in here. Going back up to where we're creating this thing. And there's also, I think it's time zone name, and you can have the format of short or long, which kind of stinks that you can have both. But I think that's time zone name, if I remember correctly. And let's say short. Those will probably overlap. Let's do long instead. And then I would need a special case for this one, which case time zone name. I think that's what it's called, but it would just do nothing. It's a string. Keep as is. Okay, let me go back down. And well, this may not be right, and that's okay. It doesn't matter that much, but it is something I want to include in the final object. As much information as we can. Offset, the zone. The zone name, because there's a time zone, which is like America, New York, and then there's the time zone name, which would be Eastern Daylight. Because the time zone is more of a location. The zone, yeah, it's confusing stuff. But let me go ahead. I think we're good enough to test this. There might still be an NY in here somewhere. No, it looks like I got them all. And now we've set it to a specific time, so the time's not going to be changing as we test, which is always sometimes nice. And it looks like this is absolutely wrong. I wonder why. Okay, that one's America, Denver. And this is Okay, so something's majorly wrong here, but what is it and why? We're not changing the tz date object. So we're getting the same diff over and over again. In fact, I don't even know where diff was defined. I think what we need to be looking at for this is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to save this in just a second. But I think what I needed to be looking at is the offset in the object. Offset is negative 240. Offset is negative 360. That makes sense. And then this other one, it was plus 5.5. So 5 times 60 is 300 plus a half should be 330. Offset 330. Positive. Excellent. So all this stuff seems to be working out. And I would like to get the short name as I'm going to worry about that later, though. Basically, I'm just going to have to run the formatter twice. Once with long, once with short. Maybe I could do it right now. Let's see. And I don't remember why I was doing this assign. I think originally, in a previous version of this, I was creating 2 of these objects. But now, that's not necessary. So I'm just going to go ahead and put this back in here. And let's go, where should this go? We want, that describes, sure. This seems right. Got all my commas at the end there. Before Prettier, I used to put the commas at the beginning because it was easier to visually align and see that everything was there. But since Prettier, and now you're allowed to put commas at the end, or maybe you were before. I don't remember. But now you can put commas at the end, and so sometimes I do that as well. Anyway, what would we need to do? TZ options. I think it was, time zone name is the thing that we might want. I should have saved this because it was working. Darn me. I'm going to save it. I'm going to test that it's still working, that I didn't accidentally mess anything up here. Let's test that it's working again. Okay, now, never mind the fact that it's printing out the wrong diff. Okay, offset's right, offset's right, offset's right. And do these look correct when I just look at them? No, because it's printing out the UTC time every time. It's probably okay, though. Let me just get rid of the stuff that isn't right, because that's confusing. And the reason to isostring new date to isostring is printing out the original is because now it does have an offset, because we added that logic up here. That get offset logic, this bit right there. And so now when we run to isostring, it's printing out a string that I should log what that string is from here. This is worth logging on its lonesome. TZ date. And it's being converted. So we can get rid of that. We might still want to log that. We still want to log that. And then again, here we can get rid of this. And then we can replace this. And that looks right. I'm going to go ahead and save. And then clear this all out. Paste it. And let's see what we get. Beautiful. Oh, wait. This one is not as beautiful as I would like it to be. Probably because of a typo. Probably I'm literally logging out the same thing twice. As opposed to, yeah, that's what happened. I am logging out. Huh, that's weird. I fixed it for those two, but not for this one. How bizarre. There we go. Get rid of that. And here we go. Boop. Good. This correctly represents the time. These two times are exactly the same. One has an offset, the other does not. Now, keep in mind, they don't have time zone information. They just have offset information because there are many time zones that could match this offset. All right, that's looking really, really good. When I'm visually looking at this, it's making a lot of sense. I really like that a lot. This is really, really great. Okay, so now we've accomplished two great purposes. Let me go ahead and add this. Oh, man, it's getting longer than I was hoping for, but such is life. So we've got, can I get from a UTC to a time zone? Yes. Can I get the time zone offset? Yes, I can. So the last thing is, how do I get from time zone to UTC? Now this is tricky because you might think that, well, first of all, there's no way to do this the way that we would. The best way to do it would be if we had a mechanism to say, here's a time, here's a time zone, give me the time in the time zone. Rather than saying, here's a UTC time, it's the inverse. We say, here's a UTC time, give me the time in the time zone. But what we want to say is, here's a time in the time zone, give me the UTC time. That's what we're trying to do. What time is it really? What is the exact time when it is May 26, 2021 at 5 p.m. in American New York? And this, it's not as simple as it would seem, because you might think, oh, well, all I need to do is know the offset, and then if I know the offset, then I just change the time by the offset. And this will work more than 99% of the time. But it won't work for daylight savings, and daylight savings is real. And it won't work when crossing the boundary of daylight savings, and then it won't work again during the time that either exists twice or doesn't exist during daylight savings. Now, what a library should do in those cases, I don't really know. I probably need to read up on that. There's probably some specification that defines what is the proper time to give if somebody asks for 2:30 during a daylight savings change when 2:30 doesn't exist or exists twice. I'm going to guess that it should be, the first 2:30 a.m. if it happens twice, and that it should be, I guess, 3:30 a.m. if it doesn't happen. I don't know what it should resolve to, but I'm going to say, basically, for my purposes here, I'm going to leave that undefined for now, because I feel like that's a problem for another day, and I can solve this problem relatively simple from now. But we need to do a guess and then a check. But we've got pretty much all the code we need to do that. Okay, let me think about this a little bit. Let me go ahead and hit my edit button. We're going to need to guess and check. So let's say the time I'm looking for, what were my examples that I gave? Well, I guess I don't even need to use those. Let's just say this is the time that I want to get in that time zone. Yeah, this will work. So my UTC date, let's say that my UTC date is my target date in the time zone. If we could get rid of the Z and we could apply the offset, right? So what we should be able to do is just take the offset, put it in reverse, and then that should give us the time, right? So let's try this out with the New York time. So this is all UTC to TZ. Now we need to try TZ to UTC. So the first thing that we're going to need to do with that is it's going to be the same thing as before. But we're going to do var offset equals tzd2.offset. And then we're going to get rid of the offset. Offset's a string, so let's set it to an empty string. Then okay, so we're gonna get this time as an object. We're gonna strip the time out of the object. And then I think we're going to take the original time. So let's call this orig equals new date of, what do we call it, D? UTC date. So basically we're just taking a copy of that date. And then we want to do set minutes, get minutes, and then we want to give it the offset, right? So let me think about this for a second. And I'm probably going to need to put some comments here to get this right. Let me bring this down. So what time is this in UTC time? Because we've gone the other way. We've gone, this is UTC time. What is it in New York time? In New York time, we're subtracting 4 hours. So it should be, if this is the time in New York, then we're adding 4 hours. So would it be minus the offset? We're going to take that time and we're going to subtract the offset, and then we're adding 4 hours. And that should work for the reverse as well. So if this is the time in Colombo, then we're subtracting 5 hours and we're getting the UTC time. I think that's right. Okay, so set minutes. I think this is right. But then we need to get, let's call this, it's not original. It is modified date. So we'll take the modified date and we'll get a T3. Now, if the T3 offset is equal to the offset, then we're in good shape. So if the offset didn't change, then we know that there wasn't a daylight savings time. And this is what we're going to get when we run this. But there is, what is the code I was working on where I have tests where I have the times the daylight savings time takes place. I think it was in Go. I think I know the repository it was. Anyway. Let's go ahead and just run this. And the very last one, mod date is not defined. Okay, so var mod, oh yeah. Let's call it mod date. Is that right? That looks right. Okay, so this is offset is as expected. So that means that this is doing the right thing, I think. So we need to get that ISO time here. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at that. So we're down to the final bits here, but this is the part that's a little bit brain bending. Let me take this time and do new date dot to ISO string. If the time in New York on May 27th is 4:15, then the UTC time is 8:15. Yes, this is almost there. We just need to know what is the daylight savings time date in the United States. Second Sunday in March. What? Seriously? The second Sunday in March, we don't even have a date for it? Ugh, time. That's really how it's defined? Ugh. 1945 to 1966. Can you imagine 20 years of not knowing what time it is? Oh. Starts on the second Sunday in March and ends on the first Sunday in November. Current schedule was introduced in 2007. Okay, so I said a few years ago. I guess it was more than a few years ago. It seemed like a few years ago. Time compression. Bah. Okay. Anyway, so what we need to know then is, yeah, 2:30 a.m. does not exist. So here's where it gets tricksy. Let me go back over here. Let's say let's go ahead and go with November 7th because that's in the future. November 7th, 2021. So I'm going to go ahead and pick this right here. And we are going to pick November is the 11th month, despite November meaning 9. Nov as in 9. Time is so weird. Okay. And at 4 a.m., the time shift will have already happened both in New York and in the target. Right, no, we're subtracting, so we're adding. So what I need to do is I need to position this such that the offset will be different between the 2 days. So I think what we actually need is to pick November 6th. And then we need to pick, I think, something like 22. So, because what we're trying to do is get it so that when we look at the difference in the time, the offset that we get is wrong. For the actual day. Or that the time just doesn't match. Oh, sorry, this is going to make my brain hurt a little. I might have to resume this tomorrow. I may not have the brain power for the last little bit of this as late as it is. So we might have to resolve to take 3 tomorrow. But I'll go a little bit further. Let's at least get to testing this. Okay, so if we, at that time in New York, daylight savings time will be in effect. If we convert it to UTC, then it will be in the future. And if we look at the UTC time as the New York time, then daylight savings won't be in effect. We're just going to have to try this on both sides of the boundary condition here. Because what that's going to convert to, let me just think about this for a second. What will this be in UTC? What it will be is add 4 hours. So it'll be O2 like this, right? Okay. And then if we go the other way, say we go to 3 a.m. 2 a.m. doesn't exist. So that would be an interesting one to try. 2 a.m. would be ambiguous. But I think what we'd end up matching would be the first 2 a.m., which would jump to 3 a.m. So I think we would, and then we would be how many hours different? But we'd be 1 less hour different. So I think that we would still only jump by 4 hours. Because 2:15 a.m. and 3:15 a.m. would be the same time then. Okay, and then let's say, what would this be if we went to, say, 4:15 a.m.? Then this would be, wait, no, this was with the 4 hour change. That would be, I think it would be a 5 hour change. I don't know. I actually don't know what that would be, because it would be the same as the January time. What did we find out earlier? Currently in March, daylight savings is in effect. Let's go back here. Okay, daylight savings time. It starts daylight time. It starts on March 14th and it ends on November 7th. So we're in daylight savings time right now, which means the negative 240 is daylight savings time and the negative 300 is normal. So here we're in daylight savings time. So we are negative 240. So that's 4 hours. So we would go 4 hours ahead. Here, we're no longer in daylight savings time, which means that we're negative 5 hours. So we would go 5 hours ahead from 3. Right? That doesn't even make sense, does it? Am I getting this right? We skip. We go back to 1 a.m. Oh, okay. I was doing it wrong. I was thinking about it the wrong way. It's not skipping forward. It's going back. So that does make sense. So it's going back to 1 a.m. at 2:15. Well, we don't know. We don't know what time it goes to. Let's assume it goes back to 1 a.m. and then we go forward 5 hours. And so it would end up being 6. And then at 4, if we go forward 5 hours, then we would end up at 9. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and just save this regardless. All right, so now I got some times to work with. And then, so we got our guess and check method here. So if the offset of our 2 times ends up being the same, then we're probably okay. But if our offset ends up being different, then we're going to have to do something to adjust by the offset of the offset. So what would the offset of the offset be? It would be subtracting one offset from the other offset. And then adding that to the original, no, adding that to the modified time. And then if at that time we get a different offset, then I don't think there's anything we could do, because maybe we just get stuck in a loop, because we would be in that 2:30 a.m. zone. The 1:30 a.m. that happens twice. 1:30 a.m. will happen twice, or 2:30 a.m. won't happen at all. That's what it is. Okay, anyway. All right, so we're going to get some badness on which one? This one actually should work, I think. We'll see, because we're shifting both ways in this case. But what I would want to see is if the offsets are not the same, then I want to see this offset and this offset. See which one I need to subtract from the other. And then here, so this is kind of bad, because I've gotten to the point where I'm having a hard time writing out the solution by hand. Because I can throw JavaScript at the problem, but at this point, in my own head, I'm not correctly resolving what the times are as I'm thinking about how to do these switches. This is something that's just kind of complex. So I'm going to run the code, not having done the right thing, which is already know the solution by my own brain. But then I'm going to see whether I'm looking at it from the forwards perspective or the backwards perspective. Because when I run the code, I'm going to get some output. Because up to this point, just about everything, I've written the code so that I know what's coming out at the end. And then I'm just testing that the result that I get matches what I expect. And that if it's different, that I'm checking either what my brain thought or the code, to see which one's correct. But in this case, I don't actually know what the right solution is. I don't actually know which offset, what is the offset going to be if this happens? Well, let me think about it for a second. Because it's going into UTC time. I'm formatting it in this time, which is going to be the wrong time. Because what I want, my target time is to find this time in New York. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to convert that to UCT time. So it's going to be wrong. It's going to be off by a positive amount of 4 hours right then. but then I'm going to boost the UTC time forward by 4 hours, which means that the time that I'm going to get, so this should work. This should give me what I expect still. I should still end up in this condition. Offset is as expected. I don't think that it's going to be until I bump the time to 2 a.m. on the next day. I think that's when the UTC offset is going to give me, that's going to give me an offset that is the shorter offset, the 4-hour offset. But then when I actually move forward, I think I might actually need to do it at 3 a.m. in order to test this. Because if I set it for 2 a.m. and 2 a.m. is happening twice, I think, well, no, 2 a.m. is not happening twice. Then it, yeah, so this one I think will give me a wrong offset. It'll be off by an hour. So my second offset, okay, there's a third condition I have to watch out for here. So if the offset is the same, I still might end up with the wrong time, because my target time is 22. So basically here, what I need is a way to check what is, so get UTC hour. So UTC dot get, no, UTC date dot get UTC hours. Is that what it is? I think that's what it is. And then UTC minutes. Let's just do a new date. Yeah. Okay, that's what I need. So the other problem that I could have is if, I guess it's like this. If tzd3 dot hour is not equal to get hours, or tzd3 dot minute is not equal to UTC date dot get minutes. This could be correct. There we go. So this is the other condition that I need to have. So the offset could have changed in between the two times. And if the offset changes, I don't think that that's actually a problem. I think it's only a problem if the hour is different. It's okay for the offset to be different. It's not okay for the hour to be different. So I think this change right here is not what's important. So it's more like, whoa, no, don't do that, please. Ah. Okay. So let's think about this again. I don't think the offset's important. I think the offset, yeah, offset is okay to change. So this would be target time is same as expected. And this would be daylight savings confusion. See, it's so good that before I tested the code, I thought more about it. Hopefully my thought was right. I think it would be worth logging at least the tzd3.offset and the offset. I think if my hypothesis is wrong, this will be telling. Okay, so what we want to find are things that are in the boundary of the offset, this is edge case testing right here, off by 1 errors. This is what we're trying to get to. All right, so if I ended up with my target time is the same as my source time, then I won. If my target time and my source time are not the same, it's because the offset changed and I didn't catch, and I have the wrong offset. So then I need to recalc. I need to create a new offset, recalc, and then I should be able to do the same test again, and I should have the right time. I'm just going to go ahead and save this before I test it. Oh no! Ooh, no. Oh, that'd be terrible. Oh, that would have been terrible to lose that work. All right, let's see what we get here. Target time is same as expected. Okay, that works. But when I bump it to the next day, and I bump it to 2 a.m., really here what I need to be testing is I need to test 1 a.m., 2 a.m., and 3 a.m. And I need to test this both when I'm beginning and I'm ending daylight savings. So at this point, daylight savings, this time is going to happen twice. So there are 2 valid times. The first valid time is if I just add 4 hours. And the second valid time is if I'm ending it, I go back an hour. So that hour happens again. But then this time, well, at 3 a.m. I know that I'm +5, so it should be 8. I guess the question that I should be asking, really, since I've got the daylight savings time confusion, even though my target is to get to New York time, I should be questioning what is it at 5, 6, and 7. And I feel like maybe this is the answer. This is going to be 7. No, I think. Let me think. No, I think what we're going to need to do is actually swap this a little bit. This one is 1, this one's 2. Move this one down. All right, so it's 5, but it's also 6, and then by the time 2:15 rolls around, it is 7. And then when 3:15 rolls around, it's 8. That looks right. Okay, I'm going to save that. And then we to make this robust, we need to do the opposite as well. Okay. And then we need to also test it with something like the Indian Standard Time that's a positive number. Okay, but I think at least the comments are correct here. So if we adjust, it'll be interesting to see. I don't think we're going to get a wrong answer here because it's going to take the first time that it happens and it's going to give us I'm pretty sure that it's going to give us the right time. Well, a right time, that is to say, because there are two right times. Target time is same as expected. So, yeah. Cool. But if we advance it one more hour, that's where we should start hitting confusion, where the target time is not what's expected. So the target time is the same as is expected. Really? I'm having a hard time believing that. So I just changed this to 2. Hour is 1. Huh. Is that right? One a.m. does happen twice. So technically, that is a correct time. It's not the time that I was expecting. So to do second or first. So let's go one more. I'm going to actually put this in a comment. Target time is as expected. Is it really, though? That's definitely not. Well, it kind of is, in the sense that 2:15 with the time change would give us 7. But no, I put in 3:15. So this is not correct. So something is wrong here. UTC get hours. UTC get minutes. This is going to take a little more debugging. I'm not quite sure where it's gone wrong. But the UTC date, we should be getting 3 out of this. Let's just check this by hand, shall we? UTC date dot get hours. What? Oh, get UTC hours. Get UTC hours. Okay, that gives me 3. And then get UTC minutes. All right. And yet, this is obviously not 3. So how is this condition passing? To say that the hour let's just take a look at this. Ooh. Two and 3. 2 is not equal to 3. Not in my world. Target time is the same as expected. So what is wrong with my if condition? Or. Needed an and. See why checking edge conditions is so important? Sanity check. Okay, so now I need to go back from the start and retry everything. So let's go all the way back to, well, I'm just going to go back to the very first case here. and just re-verify. Shouldn't be any change there. That one, I expect it to work. Great. Okay, go ahead to 7. And at this point, it would probably be more beneficial to have a unit test file than to be doing this in the browser. But I'm being the wrong kind of lazy, not the kind of lazy that saves time, but the kind of lazy that costs more time right now. So this is my own stupid waste of my life, but I'm doing it. Yeah. Let's see. So where was I at? I want to check 01. Time is the same as expected. Okay, that's good. Now, that's what I expect. Now, 02 is where I'm a little fuzzy on what is going to be right or wrong. Okay, so here we are. This is how we know whether we have the first or the second. Because with the first one, the offset is different. So what have we got? So this really could be multiple things. I'm going to lay this out here. Is it fair to say that this is the same as I think it's I don't even know which way to write this. These are the same thing. So if we're saying it's 2:15 a.m. minus 400. Oh wait, but this should be 7, right? Isn't that what we're saying? Is the UTC time here? Okay, so this I think is wrong. It's getting back. Is it getting back the target time? No, it's not. Okay. Daylight savings confusion. Good. Yes. Okay, we got to daylight savings confusion. I think that's a good place to save for tonight. I just want to see, do we get past it when we get to 3? That's what I want to know. Or are we still in the daylight savings confusion at 3? We're still in the daylight savings confusion at 3. But we should not be in the daylight savings confusion at 4. If that's true, then I'm happy. Target time is same as expected. Cool. Good. So we have daylight savings confusion at 2 and at 3, but not at 4. And that's okay, that's a good place to be. We've narrowed it down to the last step here. All right. Well, this is a good pause point. I think I'm going to copy this back into the original issue. And then that's going to become the code eventually. Oh gosh. Time is no simple thing. I don't even believe that time exists. well, motion happens, things happen, and we use certain things to measure other things relatively. I think this is the theory of relativity, right? Time is not, well, like everything in life. Maybe I should say time is real, math isn't real. Math is a made-up construct to approximate things. What was this? Would I want to edit something? Do I want to edit this? What was it? There we go. Gonna add that comment there. And all right. Well, if you found this to be useful or enlightening or entertaining, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. If you want to subscribe, you can do that down in the doobly-doo. I am going to try to finish this up tomorrow, and then eventually we are going to be going back to the HTML forms. That's still on the docket. But the other thing is we got some stuff with authentication that might probably come before the HTML stuff. We have some stuff, so I'm going to be doing Google Auth and then cookie exchanging for a token. And then we also have some stuff with async express with error handling. Because the most popular async module for Express.js for Node is junk, and I don't know why people use it. It's not a very good replacement. Whereas there's another one that is pretty good, but it doesn't do error handling right. And after looking at the code and trying to make a modification myself, I found that I don't think that it's reasonable to get it to do error handling correctly because of the way that it wraps values. And this is back to because the way that Express is, and the way that it has multiple function signatures, meaning that the function behaves differently if you give it 3 arguments versus 4 arguments versus 2 arguments. So there's a little trick to get around that. That's not too bad. And so I'll be going over that probably tomorrow. Anyway, with all of that said, adios.